Vicki. How are you? Good to see
Hey,
you.
hi. Good to see you too. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. This is
Thank you.
great,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So, where's home for you, Vicky?
Home is Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah, and it's like for you, it's not just home. Like you live in your family home where you were since you were what 6 or 7 years old, I think.
10, 10. We
10 years.
into this house when I was 10 years old, and I left. I did the thing that all boomers do. I left, went out, lived in lots of places, came back, and in 2004, I moved into the house that I grew up in.
Oh wow! And so you've used your life experience really as a voice for equality, for diversity, for inclusion. How long have you been speaking and training just professionally? How long have you been doing that?
For about 30 years. And I have really tried to use my life to open minds, to open doors, and to have what I call constructive, open, non-confrontational dialogue with people about reality and helping
Yeah.
people to understand my reality.
Yeah, your style is different than most other people in that you're very willing to just kind of confront even like you talk about Negro privilege or something or words like that. And for some people, those are even still today trigger words that if anybody, I think anybody else other than you who would say it would be pulled off the stage and you know and never speak again. But you've been able to take your life experience and speak from your own truth, haven't you?
I've tried. And it's interesting that in the last few months, with all of the horrors of Mr. Floyd's death and Breonna Taylor's death and all of these things coming to light, I'm not saying all of things started, because what we realize is this has been going on for 400 years, where people don't respect people and people don't value lives, and where people who look like me and other people of color just still aren't, we're dehumanized. And it was important for me to begin to change the way I talk about this and to own that, yes, in my life, even though I grew up in the segregated South in Memphis, I had certain privileges, a lot of privileges I didn't have, but there were certain privileges that I have and have now, and not because I'm wealthy, I'm not talking about that kind of privilege, but I want to be able to use that to open conversations.
What are some of those privileges that you think you had, even though you kind of grew up in kind of the Jim Crow South?
First of all, even though I went to segregated school, I had teachers who cared about me. And these were teachers who were telling Black kids in the 60s, 50s and the 60s that we could be anything we wanted to. Even though the world wasn't telling us that we could be anything, they were telling us, and I could name them, and they made us read Shakespeare and they, all of these types of things. And they told us, you can be anything you want to be. You don't listen to all of that other noise. And so that was a big privilege for me, is to have people who believed in me. I also had a mother I had a mother who was a fighter.
Yeah.
I had a mother who was a fighter and who stood up and spoke out. And I had a father who was a conciliator. And so it was the both of them together, I think, that helped shape me. So I was always surrounded by love. And I had people in my life who kept telling me that I could be anything that I wanted. And they helped me to block out what was going on around people saying that little girls who look like me couldn't do this and couldn't do that, even though they had never seen it. People had never seen, Black women do things that they kept telling us that we could do. But either they believed it or they faked it till we made it. I don't know what they did, but they gave us that. And I would venture to say, you speak to many people, boomers, from this area in Memphis in the late 60s. And I graduated high school in 1969, and they just gave us the inspiration that we could be, we could do, and more than that, we had to. The doors were opening and that it was up to us to go through them.
Wow, that is awesome.
Where did they get that from, do you think? Where did they get that message from? It's lovely for me to hear that, you know, that they were so inspiring to you amongst everything that was going on. Where
I
did they get
think
that?
they got that message from desire, that they could see
Right.
that there was something better out there. And again, the doors had started to open, the laws had started to change. And the message was, even if it's just a little bit of a crack,
right,
you have to go through it and you have to be the best that you can be. I mean, for an example, in 1965, teachers took a busload of us to the New York World's Fair. That didn't happen in 1965. We made the newspaper, Negro children go to New York. That was, no, I mean, literally. And when I think about what those teachers did for us, we went to the World's Fair, we went to the Canadian border, we visited DC. Black people didn't do that in 1965. It was a bus tour. And the fact that these teachers wanted us to have those opportunities, and that our parents, when I think about it, I mean, I came from working class parents, and it was $75. When I think about what $75 was for my parents in 1965 for something like that, but they both said, we're gonna make this happen.
Wow.
And so here's some we stayed in hotels. Never stayed in a hotel. It was 1965. I never stayed in a hotel. And so the idea that they were willing to take a busload of kids to expose us, take us to Washington, D.C., take us to New York, to the World's Fair, to see, to be. We went to the top of the Washington Monument. We went to the White House. It was unbelievable to have those experiences.
Wow.
You know, obviously we're not perfect, and we're not where we need to be as a society. But you know, as I hear your story and I think about, we've come a long way though, have we not?
Yes, we have come a long way. We have come a very long way. I can remember going further back as a child. I can remember going downtown and seeing the white and colored water fountains. And this is where my mother, Miss Fierce, is what I call her, would step in, and I would say, I'm a little girl. I'd say, I'm thirsty, I'd like some water. And she says, oh no, we don't drink out of those water fountains. And these were before the days of bottled water. And I would go, but there's 2 water fountains there. She goes, no, we don't drink out of any of those water fountains. And so I can remember, no, we have come a long way. But I will say this, I thought, and again, I'm an older boomer, I think most of us thought that the civil rights movement, when the laws changed, that we wouldn't even have to talk about diversity and inclusion anymore. That once people that we all got to know each other, and I got to interact with people who were different from me, and they had the opportunity to interact with me and people who look like me, that then we would all understand each other and accept each other. And what we've come to understand is about a movement has to keep moving. And I think we got very comfortable. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about people of color, I'm talking about people of conscience. Because the icons of the civil rights movement were huge. When you think about Dr. King, and when you think about John Lewis, who we had just lost, and when you think about Malcolm X, and when you think about Dorothy Height, because there were women involved. These people were larger than life. And I think when we started to lose those people were waiting for the next leader. We are the next leaders. It is up to each one of us to keep this going. So this renewed conversation about diversity and inclusion, while it makes me happy and it warms me, I'm a little sad that we're where we are. Oh, I can go to any hotel, and if no one will put in the newspaper now, Black woman goes to a hotel or goes on a bus trip, not anymore. But the idea that I can go to any hotel, I can ride on a plane, I can do lots of things that people could not do, in the 60s. But we are still struggling with this. The laws have changed, but I'm not sure if people still really have a full understanding of how to tap into their own unconscious bias, and we all have them, and to really get rid of them and work them and accept and embrace differences. We tried so hard to assimilate. I'm gonna be honest with both of you. The whole idea about going through those doors was, if you go through those doors, the only way you're going to be successful is that you fit into that culture. In my first job, I was told, you ought to do something with that hair. Don't act too black. Don't wear light colors and flowers because it'll make you look too girly. You might want to try to lose that Southern accent. And don't put pictures of your family up because you won't be taken as a serious professional. Who was I supposed to be? So when you have to try to assimilate into a dominant culture in order to be successful or accepted, it's extremely stressful. And you can't bring the best of who you are to the workplace because you're so busy worried about trying to be like everybody else. And when people around you don't see your differences as an asset and don't value you for being your authentic self, that becomes a problem, not only for the person, it becomes a problem in the workplace because there's no way that you can really work at optimum power when you're so worried about trying to fit into a culture that really isn't yours. It wasn't designed for you.
Yeah, we heard that as we were creating the diversity inclusion program, that, one of the challenges was that, people of color who would come into the workplace couldn't be they couldn't share their weekend experience. So, at the Monday morning kind of pre-meeting when everybody's talking about what did you do this weekend, it's not truly an inclusive environment if some member of that team isn't free to share what they did with their family. Because it may not have fit into, what other people in the organization were doing, Yeah,
because you're afraid that if you say something, if you make a slip that other people don't understand or don't accept, you're out, or they look at you in a very, very different way. I mean, it's why women often have neglected to talk about family. And now we have men, we know in the workplace now we have men who are dedicated to their families, and where some companies offer paternity leave, very few men will take it because they feel like that will cast a shadow on them as professionals.
Yeah.
I can remember calling in sick and saying I was sick, not saying my kids were sick. Because if I called in and said I was sick, that was okay. But to say that, so she's not serious, she's going to be taking off because her kids are sick. That whole judgment thing, being a woman in corporate America, which I guess they were saying you can't, and then you would see all these things. We're a family-friendly company. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, one of the saddest things I think for me in these last 6 months is as I've been speaking to my friends who are Black and hearing their stories. One couple says that the first thing the husband does when he gets in the car is buckles his seatbelt. And I thought, yeah, I buckle my seatbelt too. I buckle my seatbelt for my own personal safety. He buckles his seatbelt not to give a cop a reason to pull him over for driving while Black.
Right.
And just as I say that, I've got goosebumps because that didn't even register in my awareness. Like, what? And it's so hard, I think, for people who haven't experienced this to even understand it, because I heard it from story after story after, think of all the people we've spoke to.
Right.
Every single one of them. And these are people I've known for 5-10 years who are professionals that I had no idea that they had in their mind. They say, when I'm in a meeting, I have to really be careful how I pronunciate every word, because otherwise, if I let my just kind of linguistic pattern get lazy, then I'm going to be called uneducated, and I'm going to be looked at like that. I'm thinking, no, I don't think that. But there's a dominant culture that you said that does.
And then on the other hand, we have also been told, which is they think it's a compliment, but it's really a microaggression. You speak very well. Or before I met you in person, I thought you were white. That's supposed to be a compliment.
Yeah.
And so what you talk about, I am the mother of 2 adult sons, and I am the grandmother of a 15-year-old young man. And I think about this stuff all the time. I remember when the talk, you ask any person of color about the talk with their kids, about driving, about going places. You have to have the talk to, keep your hands up, don't get smart, make sure that you're driving. My son, my youngest son, learned to drive. We lived in Houston, in the suburbs. Again, upward mobility working for us. And we were living in the suburbs in Houston. And he had an 11 o'clock curfew. And I was sitting downstairs, big picture window. And all of a sudden I saw lights. Just lights. This is a true story. Lights coming through the curtain. I opened the door and there's the neighborhood watch and 2 police cars. And my 16-year-old son is looking terrified and standing like this. And I run out of the house screaming, he lives here. He's lived here since he was 9 months old. He lives here. I am screaming. And I run to the edge and I stand next to him at the driveway. And, the lights, I can't see them because they got all these lights going. And the man is like, well, he was driving around in the neighborhood. This is his neighborhood. He lives here. And he was driving around he lives here. And I said, do you need to see ID? What do you need? And then they were like, well, no, okay. I don't know what would have happened if I had been upstairs, if I had been in bed. I don't know. I don't even want to think about what would have happened. So of course, when he gets in the house, I said, what were you doing? He said, I was dropping my friends off. Oh, you had friends in the car. But now imagine that you can't have friends in a car. Because if you see often, if more than 2, especially black men, are seen together, that's a problem. So he's driving around dropping people off. And they said he was driving around the neighborhood. He lived there. That's a total true experience. And I'm not going to tell you that I feel totally comfortable in light. I mean, I don't think anybody's coming after me, but I don't know. You make sure you got to check your brake lights, all these kind of things, and have that talk. And not just with the boys or the males, but also with the girls. I remember looking at when my kids were little, I don't know if you know what those big water guns are, those super soaker things that everybody plays with in the summer. And my kids, had them and they were always fun. And we'd have a blow up pool in the back. I started to buy one of those for my grandson when he was about 8 or 9. I actually had it in my hand. And I thought, no, because little boys have been killed because they've had a water gun. And that made me so sad. Because it was summer and I thought, I'm gonna get him a super soaker, and he can play with it. And I thought, no, I'm not getting anything for him that remotely even looks like a gun.
Wow. What's the answer? What's the next step? What can people do? What's an action step? We hear the debates on the news all the time, and it's just frustrating because, everybody can now. I think everybody's getting much more articulate to be able to identify and speak about the problem and bring clarity to what the problem is. I think there's an understanding at some level of kind of how we got here, right? And of course, there's people on both sides of our political world that are purposely creating non-starters, right? And so there's some non-starter conversations that don't get anywhere. But for the people who are truly invested in helping people and moving us forward and finding reconciliation and unity, what can people do? What can people do?
They can do exactly what you say you've done. First of all, is listen. You say, I've been listening to people who have been telling me their stories, and you've been reflecting on those stories and how those stories are different from yours and trying to understand. That's the first thing you can do, is listen and believe it, and not go back with, oh, it wasn't that bad, or are you kidding? Or no, just listen. And the next thing to do is, again, for all of us to think about our thinking. We all have to think about our thinking. And I mean, including people of color, we have to think about our thinking, about why we think the things we do, we think, And then what are we going to do about it? We're going to learn, and we're going to grow, and we're going to examine our own biases. And specifically, majority people to understand that I don't think people are bad people. I take the high road. We are all a product of the times that we grew up in, the environment that we grew up in, the families that we grew up in, the messaging that we received, whether it came from outside or whether it came from within our families. The idea is we don't have to stay stuck there. We can learn more about diversity. We can learn more about inclusion. We can learn about equity. We can learn how to examine our own privilege. And that's why this work is so important, but you have to be willing to learn and accept and not get defensive. Yeah. No one that I know or anybody is alive had anything to do with slavery. But you can't deny that it happened. Fortunately, we still have some people who, not fortunately, but there are still people who unfortunately were victims of the Holocaust who will tell you about their experiences. And we're losing them every day. But it happened. And it's not for people who didn't go through those to be very defensive about it or to say it wasn't that bad or to lay some kind of 21st century blanket over it. Just listen and learn. I'm learning so much about what happened to Black people. They didn't teach us a lot about that. I didn't know about the Tulsa riots. I just learned about that in the last 4 or 5 months. So it's not that we have all the answers as people of color. We're on this journey also. But we also have a lot that we can share, but we will, I know you only share it in an environment that is open. Because if you are afraid to give away too much of yourself and that people will weaponize that and use it against you, that is not an inclusive environment. That's why we have to have inclusive leaders in organizations, in companies, even in faith-based communities, where people can actually tell their stories and be themselves without fear of judgment, retribution, or defenses.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Wow, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Yeah,
22 minutes goes by so fast.
Yeah.
It has just been wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicki.
Well, thank you. And I'm so proud to be part of the Empowered Life community.
Right on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicki.
Be well.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Lead on.